Constitution using the Federalist Papers to prove original intent and meaning of the words and phrases in the Constitution. She knows how federal judges and politicians have ignored our U.S. Constitution for over 100 years. She shows how we can restore our constitutional republic by learning and enforcing our founding principles. Welcome tonight, Publius Huldah.
For coming. Thanks to my sponsors, and thank you so much to American Legion for opening your hall to us tonight. The Con lobby wants to get rid of our Constitution and impose a new one. To get a new Constitution, they need a convention. So they are saying our Constitution is causing our problems and we need to amend it. And we can only get the amendments they say we need at a convention. Article 5 provides two methods of amending our Constitution. Congress proposes amendments or calls a convention to propose amendments if 2/3 of the states apply for it. The first method was used for our existing 27 amendments. Congress proposed them and sent them to the states for ratification or rejection. Under the second method, Congress calls a convention. We've never had a convention under Article 5 for good reason. But the Con lobby has been pushing for a convention for 50 years. Ever since the Ford Foundation produced the Constitution for the New States of America. Read this proposed Constitution and tremble for your country. In the past, conservatives defeated the periodic pushes for a convention. So the Con lobby changed clothes and changed tactics. Now they are posturing as conservatives and are marketing the con to conservatives. Let's look at the miracle the Con lobby wants to replace. When we ratified this Constitution, we created the federal government. It is a federation of sovereign states united under a national government for those limited purposes itemized in the Constitution, with all other powers reserved by the states to the people. We listed every power we delegated to the national government. Most of the powers delegated over the country at large are listed at Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 16 on this one page. All our Constitution authorizes the federal government to do over the country at large falls into 4 categories. 1, military defense, international commerce and relations. 2, immigration and naturalization. 3, domestically create a uniform commercial system. Weights and measures, patents and copyrights, a money system based on gold and silver, bankruptcy laws, mail delivery and some road building, and 4, with some of the amendments, secure certain civil rights. That's basically it. All other powers are reserved by the states or the people. This chart, and I've prepared copies for you to take home with you. I get so upset about this. I shows the purpose of the civil government. It is to secure the rights that God gave us. It illustrates the federal structure of our government and it lists the powers delegated to the federal government. The powers delegated to the federal government are listed here. As you see, it's a short list. It is only with respect to the enumerated powers listed in the Constitution that the federal government has law authority. If it's on the list, Congress may make laws about it. But if it's not on the list, Congress usurps power and acts unlawfully when it interferes. When a government merely secures God-given rights, as ours was created to do, we are never put in conflict with each other because no one has his hand in anybody else's pocket or is telling them what to do. So why did the federal government turn into Frankenstein? Because everybody ignores the Constitution. It is ignorance of our Constitution, along with the collapse of religion, morality, and personal responsibility, which brought us to the brink of destruction. We forgot that Congress has lawful authority only over the 18 to 21 powers enumerated in the Constitution. Because we didn't know what this says, the federal government was able to usurp thousands of powers which are not on the list. State governments collaborated with the usurpations by taking federal funds to implement unconstitutional programs in their states. To claim that these problems can be fixed by amending our Constitution is like saying a wicked nation can be fixed by revising the 10 Commandments. Even so, the Con lobby insists that the problem is the Constitution. They say amendments will limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. But our Constitution already limits the power and jurisdiction of the federal government to those few and defined powers listed in the Constitution. So the claim that we can control those who ignore the Constitution by amending the Constitution is so absurd they cannot possibly believe it. Mark Levin and Michael Ferris say, we need a convention so we can get amendments which limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. So let's look at their proposed amendments. Michael Ferris's Parental Rights Amendment delegates power over children to the federal government. Section 3 says, quote, neither the United States nor any state shall infringe these rights without demonstrating that its governmental interest as applied to the person, that's the child, is of the highest order and not otherwise served, and who, of course, will decide whether there is a compelling government interest to manage the children. Why, the federal judges will decide. The federal judges who looked at the word liberty in Section 1 of the 14th Amendment and said, liberty means privacy, and privacy means you can kill your baby. Mark Levin's liberty amendments do also do the opposite of what he claims. His amendment to limit the federal bureaucracy legalizes what are unconstitutional federal agencies: education, energy, agriculture, environmental protection, Department of Homeland Security, housing and urban development, health and human services, etc., etc., etc. Our Constitution doesn't authorize these agencies. They are not on the list. But Levin's amendment legalizes all such agencies for as long as Congress reauthorizes them. Article 1, Section 1 of our Constitution says only Congress can make laws. But since Woodrow Wilson, the federal agencies have been writing rules, the Code of Federal Regulations. All these rules are unconstitutional as outside the scope of powers delegated and as in violation of Article 1, Section 1. But Levin's amendment to limit the federal bureaucracy legalizes these rules and rulemaking for as long as Congress approves them. Levin's amendment to limit federal spending is also phony. Our Constitution limits federal spending to the enumerated powers. If you go through the Constitution and highlight all the powers delegated to Congress and to the President, you will get a complete list of the objects on which Congress is authorized to spend money. That's how our Constitution already limits federal spending. But everyone ignores it. Levin's amendment substitutes a budget for the enumerated powers and thus legalizes the current practice where Congress spends money on whatever they put in the budget. So Levin's balanced budget amendment changes the constitutional standard for spending from whether the object is an enumerated power to a limit on the total amount of spending. And the spending limit is fictitious because it can be waived whenever Congress votes to waive it. So their amendments don't limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. They increase the powers of the federal government by legalizing powers they have already usurped. They say, we must amend the Constitution because people in Washington don't understand it. Rubbish. Our Constitution is so simple, Alexander Hamilton said, the people are the natural guardians of the Constitution. Hamilton expected us to be able to distinguish between a lawful exercise and an illegal usurpation of power. If it's on the list, the federal government may do it. But if it's not on the list, they cannot lawfully do it. For clauses the Supreme Court perverted, interstate commerce, general welfare, and necessary and proper clauses, we don't need a convention to propose amendments showing what these clauses mean. Just look it up in the Federalist Papers. I've already done it. Here it is on one page, the original intent of those three clauses, and I'll tell you how to get a copy of this. The Con lobby banks heavily on a fraudulent George Mason quote, where they claim he said the Article 5 convention method was given to state legislatures as the remedy when the federal government gets out of control. Mason never said that. The Con lobby made it up. James Madison kept a journal at the Federal Convention of 1787. Here it is. I went through it and I pulled out every reference to what became Article 5. I wrote it all up. Here it is, all the references in Madison's journal. It's on my website. Contact me and I'll tell you how to get it. Now, this is what really happened at the convention. Under the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution, amendments had to be approved by the Continental Congress and all of the states. The dispute at the Convention of 1787 was whether Congress, under the second Constitution then being drafted, this one, should have any power over amendments. George Mason wanted the people to be able to make amendments without the approval of Congress. He said, if only Congress can propose amendments, the people won't get the amendments they want if Congress doesn't agree. So the convention method was added so that delegates could propose amendments. Mason didn't say that when the federal government overreaches, the remedy is to amend the Constitution. That's not in Madison's journal. And Mason and the other delegates had just spent 4 months creating a constitution which delegates only a tiny handful of powers to the federal government. So when the federal government usurps powers not delegated, they are ignoring the existing limitations on their powers. George Mason agreed with the other delegates that the purpose of amendments is to remedy defects in the Constitution. On June the 11th, 1787, Mason said, and I'm reading from James Madison's journal, the plan now being formed, this one, will certainly be defective, as the Confederation has been found on trial to be. Amendments, therefore, will be necessary, and it will be better to provide for them in an easy, regular, and constitutional way than to trust to chance and violence. It would be improper to require the consent of the national legislature because they may abuse their power and refuse their consent on that very account, end quote. Our problem today is not a defective Constitution. Our problem today is disobedient state and federal governments. That calls for different remedies, and our framers spelled them out. The Con-Con lobby insists that the states will appoint the delegates to a convention, each state gets one vote, and Congress and the delegates have no power over the convention. The states run the whole show. There's not a word of truth in those claims. Article 5 says Congress calls the convention. A call is the official summons for the convention to take place. It states the date and location, how delegates will be appointed, etc. Article 1, Section 8, last clause, delegates to Congress the power to make the laws necessary and proper to carry out the call. The April 2014 report of the Congressional Research Service, the CRS, confirms that Article 5 delegates to Congress exclusive authority over both methods of amendment, and shows that in Congress's preparations for Article 5 conventions in the past, Congress has provided that delegates would receive immunity from arrest and has planned to apportion delegates the same as in the Electoral College. So California would get 55 delegates, Virginia gets 13. And Congress decides who will appoint the delegates. The Con-Con lobby insists they know exactly how a convention will operate. But page 27 of the CRS report says, quote, "In the final analysis, the question, what sort of convention, is not likely to be resolved unless or until the 34-state threshold has been crossed and a convention assembles," end quote. See, we'll have to get a convention before we know how it is going to operate. This handy chart, I have it for you to take home, lays it all out as to what powers the state legislatures, Congress, and the delegates have. The states have the power to ask Congress to call a convention. Once that is done, it is out of the state's hands. So, Congress sets up the convention, and then the delegates, as the sovereign representatives of the people, have the power to throw off this form of government and propose a new one. The Con lobby says a convention is safe because 3/4 of the states have to approve whatever comes out. That is a lie. The second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence says it is the right of the people to alter or abolish their form of government and to institute a new one. Delegates to an Article 5 convention are the sovereign representatives of the people. They have the power, recognized in our Declaration of Independence, to get rid of this and impose a new constitution. We've already abolished one constitution and replaced it with another. After July the 4th, 1776, we operated under our first constitution, the Articles of Confederation. This was our constitution until this one was ratified in 1788. This is our second constitution. How did we get from our first constitution to our second constitution? There was a convention to propose amendments to our first constitution. Pursuant to Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation, the Continental Congress resolved on February the 21st, 1787, to call a convention to be held at Philadelphia, quote, "for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation," end quote. But the delegates ignored this limitation of the Continental Congress, and they ignored the instructions of their states, and they wrote our second constitution. Because of the inherent authority of delegates, it is impossible to stop this from happening at another convention. If we have a convention now, George Washington, James Madison, Ben Franklin, and Alexander Hamilton won't be there to protect you. You don't know who the delegates will be, and you won't find out until it's too late. But they will have the power to impose a third constitution. Now listen, a third constitution will have its own new mode of ratification. Our first constitution, the Articles of Confederation, required the Continental Congress and all of the states to approve amendments. But our second constitution, drafted at the Amendments Convention of 1787, provided in Article 7 that it would require only 9 states for amendments, for ratification. 13 states and the Continental Congress needed to ratify amendments to the Articles of Confederation, but only 9 states needed to ratify our new Constitution. If we have a convention today, there is nothing to stop delegates from imposing a third constitution with its own new mode of ratification. New constitutions are already prepared and waiting for a convention. The Constitution for the new states of America is ratified by a referendum called by the President. The states are dissolved and replaced by regional governments answerable to the new national government. This Constitution sets up a totalitarian dictatorship, and you will be disarmed. The Revolutionary Communist Party, United States of America, has a constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. Yeah, this is light reading. The Constitution 2020 movement is backed by George Soros, Eric Holder, Cass Sunstein, and Marxist law professors all over the country. They want a Marxist constitution in place by the year 2020. They need a convention to get this done. Ask yourself, does George Soros have the money to buy the delegates? Do you know about the North American Union? During 2005, George W. Bush met on his ranch in Texas with the Prime Minister of Canada and the President of Mexico, and they sketched it out. The 3 countries basically merge, and a parliament is set up over them. This is the task force report sponsored by the Council on Foreign Relations, which sketches out how the system is to work. Heidi Cruz was on the task force to set this up. This erases our country. The ruling establishment, the global elite, needs a new constitution to transform us from a sovereign nation to a member state in the North American community. And they need a convention to get that new constitution. Folks, this current push for an Article 5 convention is not grassroots. It's a top-down push. The Con lobby insists that delegates to an Article 5 convention can be controlled by faithful delegate laws passed by the states. That is false. Delegates to an Article 5 convention are the sovereign representatives of the people. They have sovereign immunity for whatever they do at a convention. And it's easy to circumvent faithful delegate laws. I'll show you. Delegates can make their proceedings secret and closed to the public. That's what they did on May the 29th, 1787, at the Amendments Convention, where our present Constitution was drafted. This is from James Madison's journal, and it shows where they voted to make their proceedings secret and closed to the public. If the proceedings at a convention today are secret, closed to the public, the states won't know what is going on, and they can't stop it. And if the delegates vote by secret ballot, the states would never know who did what. So it would be impossible for states to prosecute delegates who ignore state instructions. And of course, Congress can give the delegates immunity. James Madison and 3 former Supreme Court justices have warned that delegates can't be controlled. In Federalist Paper number 49, James Madison spoke at length of the dangers of an Article 5 convention. He said, among other things, that the legislators who caused the problems would get themselves seats at the convention and would control the outcome of the convention. In his November the 2nd, 1788 letter to Turberville, Madison said that he trembled at the prospect of a second convention, and that if there were an Article 5 convention, the most violent partisans and individuals of insidious views would have a dangerous opportunity of sapping the very foundations of the fabric of our country. Justice Arthur Goldberg said in his 1986 editorial in the Miami Herald that any attempt at limiting the agenda would almost certainly be unenforceable. Former Chief Justice Warren Burger said in his June the 22nd, 1988 letter to Phyllis Schlafly, "There is no effective way to limit or muzzle the actions of a constitutional convention. After a convention is convened, it will be too late to stop the convention if we don't like its agenda. A new convention could plunge our nation into constitutional confusion and confrontation at every turn." And Justice Scalia said on April the 17th, 2014, it's on a video, and I'll tell you how to get the video, quote, "I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa, who knows what would come out of that? Yet the Con lobby ridicules these warnings as fear-mongering." Now, I ask anybody in this room who ridicules these warnings as fear-mongering to consider this question: is it possible, just remotely possible, that James Madison, Justice Goldberg, Justice Warren Burger, and Justice Scalia understand something about the plenipotentiary powers of delegates to a convention that you have not yet grasped? Are there violent partisans and individuals of insidious views among us today? Yes, and they want a convention. But the Con lobby says only moral and wise people will be delegates. Let's look at that absurd claim. There are 3 ways to select delegates. Congress. Do you trust Congress to appoint only moral and wise people as delegates? No. State legislatures. Do you trust state legislatures to appoint only moral and wise people as delegates? Popular election. Do you trust the people to elect only moral and wise people as delegates? No. This is the most corrupt period in our history. Baby killing, oath breaking, responsibility shirking, lying, smearing, bribery, and moral and wise people haven't been in charge of anything for over 100 years. The Con lobby has been able to deceive people because they don't know that our Constitution already limits the federal government to the 18 to 21 enumerated powers on the list. They don't know that our Constitution already limits spending to the enumerated powers. Because they don't know, they can be manipulated to believe that the Constitution is the problem. Americans better start using their heads and the brains that God gave them. Amendments don't control governments which already ignore the Constitution. The First Amendment didn't stop them from banning Christian speech. The Second Amendment didn't stop them from restricting guns. The Fourth Amendment didn't stop them from spying on us without a warrant. And the 10th Amendment didn't stop them from usurping thousands of other powers. So, how do we enforce our Constitution? Our framers advised two remedies. One, James Madison said, our Constitution depends on the people having the virtue and intelligence to select men of virtue and wisdom to office. But because we didn't know or care what these say, we elected people who also didn't know and didn't care. The second remedy, don't go along with the lawlessness. The Declaration of Independence says that the colonial legislatures opposed the king's invasions on the rights of the people. Today, state legislatures must oppose violations of our Constitution instead of eagerly taking federal handouts to implement violations of our Constitution. Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison said, when the federal government does things which are not on the list, each state has the natural right to nullify of their own authority all such acts of the federal government. Nullification is based on the creator-creature relationship between the states and the federal government. Since the states created the federal government, they are the final authority on whether their creature has violated the constitutional compact the states made with each other. Those are our framers' words, and you can find them here. I have the quotes and the links to the original source documents, and I'll tell you how you can get this. This is proof that our framers supported and advocated nullification by the states of unconstitutional acts of the federal government. The 10th Amendment says that all powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states or the people. What happened to those reserved powers? The states sold them to the federal government. Tennessee didn't nullify Obamacare because if Tennessee nullified it, Tennessee would lose $6 billion in federal funds. I'm told the feds paid Tennessee $500 million to sign on to Common Core. According to the Pew report, PEW, 22.8% of Virginia's revenue for fiscal year 2014 was from federal funds. What reserved powers of the states and the people did the Virginia government sell to get this federal funding? And all this money is added to the national debt. The state governments, the states are not victims of federal tyranny. the states are enthusiastic participants in federal tyranny. Our Constitution is a miracle. There's nothing wrong with it except for some of the amendments Americans already got conned into supporting. Ignorance is our problem. It's our sovereign duty to know and enforce these two documents. Now, all of my exhibits are online. The handout sheets have my contact information. If you contact me, I will tell you how you can get all of these exhibits. I'm at your service. If we don't get to your question tonight, I have an Ask Questions page on my website, or you can send me an email with your question. I'm at your service all the time. And now I will take the questions. But first, someone gave me a question already, and I'll just read it because it's very important. Many people believe Supreme Court judges have lifetime appointments. Can you explain that to the audience that they do not? Okay. One of the most popular misstatements told today is that federal judges have lifetime appointments. That is false. Article 3, Section 1 says, judges serve during good behavior. They don't have lifetime appointments. In Federalist Paper number 81, at the 8th paragraph, Alexander Hamilton says that when federal judges usurp power, exceed their authority, the constitutional remedy is impeachment. So when federal judges usurp power, it is the duty of Congress to impeach, try, convict, and kick them off the bench. They serve during good behavior only. Federalist Paper number 81 at the 8th paragraph. And on my website, I have a primer on impeachment. It's impeachment. I have categories, and the category heading is impeachment.
Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
This has been wonderful. So that was a lot of good information. Before we get into the rest of the question and answers, and this is the last couple of moments for you folks who are jotting down your questions to finish that up as quickly as you can. We're going to do a couple of things real quickly. First, before we do the drawing for tonight, I neglected to mention that we're going to do two drawings actually. The first drawing is for the 50-50 raffle. And if you don't win that, you're still not out because we're going to be doing a drawing for a door prize. We've got the book Nullification by Tom Woods. One of the books that Publius referenced tonight, The Constitution in 2020. A Guns Save Lives Blaze Orange hat. You know you need that. You know you do. A light receptacle, because of the light receptacle. And a few other, The Shadows of Power, that shows the history of kind of how the oligarchy that really runs America came to be and what its objectives are. If you've not read this book, shame on you, but it's okay. You can amend it by getting yourself a copy. And tonight would be a good night, so get your ticket and you might win.
And that group, the name of that group
is the Council on Foreign Relations. This is the history, origin, and agenda of the Council. Oh, thank you. Of the Council on Foreign Relations. So we're going to sit this over to the side. I'll be back in a moment. While we do the rest of the question and answer session, we're also going to be passing a couple of buckets around. One of these is for a donation for the American Legion, who was kind enough to let us use their building tonight for free. So we want to do a little bit to thank them, raise a few shekels to put in their bucket. At the same time, on top of the 50-50 raffle, we're going to be passing another bucket around for Publius. I don't think she was aware we were going to do this, but we're doing it anyway. It's easier to get forgiveness than it is to get permission. One of the principles by which I have lived my life. It hasn't served me well. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything. Do we have more questions that I need to collect before we answer these? Wave them in the air. I'm half blind. Okay, one, and that's it? All right, then. So, this is going to be loud for a second. I'll apologize in advance. Oh, that's much better. So the first question. Some state legislators say the Articles of Confederation were not our first Constitution because we were not then the United States. Who is telling them this, and why don't they simply look it up? The title of the first Constitution was the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. Who is promoting this diversion, and why, in your opinion, Publius?
I don't know who's saying that, but it's not true. I mean, obviously, the Articles of Confederation, it was our Constitution. To deny it is like denying the obvious. They say it to confuse. And in the resolution of February the 21st, 1787, the Continental Congress specifically refers to it as our Constitution. So contact me and I'll give you the hyperlink to the resolution of the Continental Congress of February the 21st, 1787, and you can see for yourself where it says, where they refer to it as our Constitution. It's lost in my stack of stuff, but if I have time, I'll find it.
Okay, the next question. Why do you say the Con lobby, and that's in quotes, Con lobby, wants to impose a new constitution? What is your evidence the COS project proposes this?
Well, on my Facebook page, well, first of all, the whole purpose of a convention is to impose a new constitution. The idea that we can control state and federal governments who ignore the Constitution by amending the Constitution is so absurd that no rational person can possibly believe it. The purpose of a convention, historically, is to write a new constitution. That's where new constitutions are imposed, at conventions composed of sovereign representatives of the people. Now, I am not in the inner sanctum of the COS circles, but on my Facebook page several years ago, Jordan Sillers, who is the communications director, or who was the communications director for COS, I don't know what his position is now, said that he believed that we could find moral and wise American men and women who were capable of rewriting the Constitution. I've got the I made a screenshot of this. Contact me and I'll send it to you, but I think I have it here with me. Hold on. Yes, I do. Yes, Jordan Sillers. And I can pass this around. I think the majority of Americans are too lazy to elect honest politicians, but I think some men and women could be found who are morally and intellectually capable of rewriting the Constitution. Jordan Sillers, and I'll pass it around. Also, I have not personally heard Michael Ferris say this, but it has been reported to me who have personally heard him say words to the effect that if there is an Article 5 convention, he plans upon being chairman, and something about how he is going to write the new Constitution. I'm not sure I have it correct.
Thank you. That'll be passing around, everyone. It's point 3 on the bottom of the page. I mean, you can read the whole thing, but the point that she referenced was point 3 all the way at the bottom, and she read it verbatim. It's important to note, too, that the word amend is synonymous with the word change. So simply saying, oh, they're not going to change the Constitution, they're just going to amend the Constitution, okay, that was nice. And on that point, you know, I've met Michael Ferris several times. I've been in 4 different events where he was presenting his case for an Article 5 convention, and I've asked the question, Publius, to Michael Ferris on 4 separate occasions, what magic language are you going to write this new Constitution, these new amendments in, that is going to be so compelling that a body that is already ignoring language as clear as Congress can make no law, shall make no law, or shall not be infringed. Just we'll take the First and Second Amendments. We can stop there. If they can ignore language as clear as shall make no law, and then it lists 5 things about which they shall make no law, and we have thousands of laws about all of those things. Or the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. How many gun laws should we have at the federal level in the United States of America if the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed? Exactly 0. If we have more than 0, they've ignored that. So what magic language are you going to write these new amendments in? And the answer is always double talk, and that the Congress is only doing what the Supreme Court allows them to do, and the Supreme Court's only doing what Congress allows them to do. So the next question, and this is, okay, here we go. Believe the Founding Fathers thought the power of the purse, I guess we're addressing the fact that Congress, the House of Representatives, has the power of the purse, would control the president, i.e. prevent dictatorial power. The threat of government shutdown has now neutered Congress. How can we re-empower Congress?
Would you read
Sure.
that again?
So it's the idea that the Founding Fathers appear to have thought that the power of the purse, in other words, that Congress, that all bills for appropriation begin in the House, would control the president, i.e. prevent dictatorial power. But now the threat of government shutdown has neutered Congress, because every time Congress starts to assert itself, they say, well, we're going to shut down the government. So the question is, how can we re-empower Congress?
Okay, first of all, the president, you have to understand, because of the power of impeachment, the president literally serves at the pleasure of Congress. Congress has the duty to impeach a president which usurps powers. But Congress and the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branches of our federal government have been conniving to usurp powers of the American people for well over 100 years. The only way to fix it is for us to become informed on what the Constitution says, so that on an individual basis we can go to our individual representatives and start demanding that they enforce the Constitution. Unless we demand that they do it and hold them accountable when they don't, we can't fix it. Of course, Congress can control the president by impeaching him. Of course, the House can control the president by refusing to pass appropriations bills. But we don't elect to Congress men and women who have the guts to do this. That's the problem. We Congress, let that president do whatever he wants. And about the government shutdown, bring it on. I'm going to pass something around. I'm going to pass around the resolution of the Continental Congress of February the 21st, 1787, where they called the Amendments Convention, wink, wink, to be held at Philadelphia. I've circled it right down here at the bottom, where it says that the purpose of the amendments is to render the federal Constitution adequate to the exigencies of the government. And the federal Constitution, of course, at that time, was the Articles of Confederation. So the Continental Congress thought that the Articles of Confederation was the Constitution. Is that pretty conclusive?
Thank you, Publius. And let's make sure, folks, that after those make their way back around, that Publius gets those back. I don't think those were intended to be handouts tonight. Yeah. Okay, so proponents of a constitutional convention say bad amendments won't be ratified by the states. Yet, the 18th and 21st amendments are in effect opposite, and by definition, one must be bad. What would you say to that?
Well, several amendments that the American people got conned into supporting have been absolutely dreadful. First of all, at the time our Constitution was ratified, our framers knew that it had problems. Alexander Hamilton, for example, was an abolitionist. Yet the Constitution permitted slavery to continue because some of the southern states would not go along with it unless they were permitted to keep slavery. So we knew from the beginning that the Constitution would have to be amended to fix the defect of slavery. Since then, the 11th Amendment reduced the jurisdiction of the federal courts. That was a good amendment. The 12th Amendment fixed a glitch in the system for electing presidents. The 13th Amendment was required to fix the defect of slavery. The 14th Amendment, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, was required because it extended citizenship to freed slaves and was designed to protect them from Southern black codes which denied them basic God-given rights. The 15th Amendment extended voting suffrage to black males. But the next amendment, the 16th Amendment, that was passed by appealing to the basest instinct of the American people, class envy, soak the rich. The Income Tax Amendment. The 17th Amendment was one of the worst. The way our framers set up our Constitution, state governments had total control over the U.S. Senate. How? Because the state governments elected the U.S. senators. The U.S. senators were answerable to their state governments. But the progressives wanted the 16th Amendment, the progressives wanted the 17th Amendment, and the American people are so easily deceived they bought it. So, what was the question?
Whatever it is, you nailed it.
Okay.
Thank you. But leading right into that, so you addressed the 17th Amendment, which I think every thinking person realizes was terrible. Would you like to see the properly ratified 17th Amendment repealed? And would you not suggest that Convention of States and the rest of the Con lobby would be far better off to spend the money that they're spending on a convention educating congressional delegates and state legislators and the people to the goal of appealing the 17th Amendment?
Whoever asked that question, where have you been all my life? Yes, 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 and yes.
Match.com has nothing on us. You know, we've got this going on. All right, so how do you propose restoring the original, so how do you propose restoring the Commerce Clause or General Welfare Clause to its original meaning, given the SCOTUS ruling which obliterated original meaning?
Okay. First of all, you have to understand, first of all, I'll tell you what the original intent of the Commerce Clause was, and then I'll tell you what our framers said to do about judges who usurp power. 1. In Federalist Papers number 22 and 42, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison explained the original intent of the Interstate Commerce Clause. It was simply this: to prohibit states from imposing tolls and tariffs on articles of commerce as they are transported through the states for purposes of buying and selling. For example, in Tennessee, if I grow blueberries and I ship them up to Massachusetts by rail, under the Articles of Confederation, all the different states were imposing tolls and tariffs on your goods. So if you went through 6 states to your selling point, 6 states levied tolls and tariffs on your article of commerce. So the purpose of the Interstate Commerce Clause was to stop that from happening. And we know this because Alexander Hamilton and James Madison spell it out in those 2 Federalist Papers. And I have the citations to those specific papers and the paragraph numbers in that one-page handout sheet, in that one-page sheet I prepared, which you can get a copy of if you contact me, and I'll get you the hyperlink. What was the second part of the question? Oh,
How to restore it.
how to restore it. Okay. The way we restore it is for everybody in this room to learn the original intent of those 2 clauses. Read my handout sheet, look it up in the Federalist Papers, see if what I told you is correct, and then teach it to others, and talk to your representatives, your state and your federal representatives, and teach it to them. What happened in this country is this: our Declaration of Independence said that the purpose of government is to secure the rights that God gave us. Governments secure the rights God gave us by protecting us from people who seek to take them away. But during the early 1900s, the progressives took over, and they changed the purpose of government. Now, they didn't come out and say, we're going to change the purpose of government from what the Declaration of Independence says to our new purpose. They didn't say that. They presented it so that it sounded so nice and so wonderful. The new purpose was to provide for our needs and to protect us from the risks and uncertainties of life. This was the beginning of the regulatory welfare state in this country, the early 1900s. So, in order to provide for our needs, they have to take money from other people and give it to me to provide for my needs. In order to protect us from the risks and uncertainties of life, they have to have regulations to protect us from unsafe conditions. So, the American people have got to repudiate this. They have got to demand, they have to want to return to the original system of a limited federal government with only some 18 to 21 powers, weights and measures, patents and copyrights, a money system based on gold and silver. You get the drift? The American people have to want to return to limited government. But that requires them to exercise personal responsibility. And the American people seem to have rejected personal responsibility. They don't even want to have to take responsibility for their own lives. So it has been a moral collapse which has been married up with people people who wanted to change the purpose of the government to basically turn us into ignorant dependents, which we are today. Our problems are moral and spiritual, and you can't fix that politically. A moral regeneration is required.
Let me see if I can sum up what I just heard you say. It's the responsibility of every person in this room to work their backsides off. I like the word arse, because you can say that even in polite company, arse. To work their arses off to create an informed electorate.
Yes,
An informed electorate, because that is the only safe depository
yes.
for the liberties of the people.
James Madison said there's no mic. Yeah, James Madison said our entire system depends on the American people being virtuous and having enough wisdom to select men of virtue and wisdom to office. But you know, politicians get up and tell us what we want to hear, and we just blindly accept what they say. We don't test them on their knowledge of the Constitution. You should grill candidates for public office on their knowledge of the Constitution.
Say that again.
You should grill candidates for public office on their knowledge of the Constitution. They take an oath to obey it. They take an oath to obey a document they have never troubled their precious little selves to read.
So before we read the last couple of questions, this is really and truly the last moment. If you have already or have not already bought your tickets, we'll be doing the drawing right after this, just so everybody knows. All right, Helbering versus Davis gave the power to Congress to define general welfare, quote, at their discretion, end quote. How do you intend to reverse this? I think that's the same, similar question you just answered.
Yeah, but I forgot to talk about nullification. First of all, understand that the Supreme Court does not have the power to sit as a continuing constitutional convention to amend the Constitution. The original intent of the Interstate Commerce Clause is that described in Federalist Papers number 22 and 42. That is the original intent. The Supreme Court can't tell Congress, oh, you can redefine it however you want. The Supreme Court doesn't have the power to redefine it however it wants. You have to understand, what created the Supreme Court? The Constitution. What created Congress? The Constitution. Both the Congress and the Supreme Court and the executive branch, they are merely creatures of the Constitution. Creature is not my word. That's Alexander Hamilton's word in Federalist Paper number 33 at the 5th paragraph. Alexander Hamilton says that the federal government is our creature. In the Kentucky resolutions of 1798, under the 8th resolution in Thomas Jefferson's draft, he refers to the federal government as our creature. And because the federal government and all three branches of the federal government are merely the creature of the compact the states made with each other, the states as the creators have the right to tell their creature, no, you usurped power, we will not go along with it. Do contact me to get my paper on nullification, because I prove it and I give you the links to the original source documents and the places where these things were said. And then you can be an expert on nullification and speak with absolute confidence that what you say is true.
That leads right into the next question. It's like we planned this. We did. Trust us. What are the most important federal usurpations the states should nullify first?
Oh, gee. Probably the most urgent is any pretended federal executive orders. PATF rules, UN treaties, Supreme Court opinions or act of Congress which pretend to restrict or abolish firearms. We absolutely must not let that happen. Education, public education, permitted what was the door to hell in this country. Common Core wasn't crammed on the states. The states willingly accepted it for the federal funds. The states have got to get the federal government out of education. For example, in my state of Tennessee, it seems to me that Tennessee was very worried that they couldn't keep separate bathrooms for girls and boys because the federal government would cut their federal education funds. The states have got to stop. The easiest thing for the states to do is just say, we will not take federal funds to implement unconstitutional federal programs. But the state governments are addicted to federal funds. They're like heroin addicts. They think, we can't get along without this money. But folks, it's all going to come crashing down soon enough. Anyway, because this spending can't go on. But in Tennessee, legislators preen their moral outrage at out-of-control federal spending, and then the next day they refuse to nullify Obamacare because we'll lose our federal funding. Folks, the states are not victims of federal tyranny.
That's a fact. Some years ago, I was in Oklahoma. There was a state legislator there who was running for governor. His name was Randy Brogdon, a good friend of mine and an outstanding patriot. And this was at the time when the North American Union, and particularly the NAFTA superhighway, was really in full steam. How many of you have ever been to Texas? So the highway system there is very, very different. If you're in the inmost lane, ever so often it just turns into a turn lane and you're just making a U-turn and going back the other way if you're on the access roads beside the interstate. Those are called Texas turnarounds. And so Randy Brogdon said that, he made the statement that if the governor of Texas thought he was going to build TTC 35, Trans-Texas Corridor 35, up through Oklahoma City, he said he's got another thing coming. He's going to have to build the biggest Texas turnaround you've ever seen because that thing ain't crossing the Red River if I'm the governor. And in the galley, one of the journalists, reporters raised his hand and said, Senator Brogdon, what will you do if you stand by this principle and they cut off your federal highway dollars? And Randy Brogdon, because he's a man, said, perhaps you don't understand how federal dollars work. You see, we raise those monies here locally in the forms of taxes. We remit those to the federal government, and then they send us back a portion of those to build our own highways with. And if they mess with me, I just won't send them the stupid money to begin with. What, are they going to rob us live on CNN with armored personnel carriers at the governor's mansion? That's what we need. We need that kind of manly Christian firmness that says, you know, I'm not going to go too far, but I'm not going to move either. Last question. I'm sorry.
Precisely.
That's what we need. So COSP, this last question, and then we're going to do the drawing. COS people say the federal government will have nothing to do with their convention. So, if they are asked, why then do they have to make an application to the federal government, what do you think they would say?
I'm sorry.
So the general theme of the question is that the COS folks say, well, the federal government has nothing to do with this convention. You know, it's the convention, you know, it's all by itself, and the federal government has nothing to do with it, it's the states. So then I guess the nature of the question is, if that's so, then why do the states have to apply to the federal government for the convention? Why can't they just hold the darn thing themselves? I mean, COS just held one.
Yeah, well, I can write stories too. If I wrote a story, I'd have George Soros there with his bags of cash. handing out to the delegates. Yeah, obviously, the states apply. Article 5 sets forth the proceedings, the procedures. The states apply to Congress to call it. Congress does what it does to call it. The CRS report, it's online, contact me and I'll send you the link, discusses in excruciating detail what Congress has done in the past. This push for an Article 5 convention comes up every 10 or 20 years for the last 50 or 60 years, ever since the Ford Foundation produced the Constitution for the new states of America.
I think that answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once Congress calls it and the delegates are seated, as James Madison shows in his journal, the first thing they did was elect the officers. The second thing they did on May the 29th, 1787, was vote to make it secret and close it to the public. The delegates are in charge. They will do whatever they want.
But why do the states have to apply?
Article 5 says if the states want it, if the states want a convention, they have to apply to Congress. And Congress will call it, will set it up. And then, once the convention is convened, and the delegates are seated and close the doors, they can do whatever they want.
Thank you, Publius. Big round of applause for